of the most outspoken Democratic senators during the age of the Trump administration, and he's been especially outspoken about the Affordable Care Act, Medicare, and Medicaid. So it's really my honor to welcome back to Scranton U.S. Senator Robert Casey.
Thanks very much, everyone. I want to say something to you first. The first thing I want to say is thank you for being here. Thanks for taking the time on a great Sunday to talk about a matter of basic justice, and that's health care. Health care for our children, health care for our families, and for our communities. So we're in a big fight, but you know what? We're going to win this fight. We're going to stop them. We're going to stop the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And you know what? If we don't stop them in that, we're going to make sure that we replace it with what we want for health care, what we want for our families. Look, I know the other side talks about the Bible once in a while. Well, I got a line from the New Testament. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for justice, for they shall be satisfied. And when we focus on an issue like healthcare, we're talking about a matter of basic justice. And you know what? We're hearing a lot lately from Republicans in Washington. They're saying, oh, don't worry when we repeal the Affordable Care Act. We're going to replace it with something much better. We're going to replace it with something that will be just fine. Don't worry. But you know what? We've already seen the outlines of their ideas. They don't have a plan. They have a scheme to try to deceive you that they can get this done. But we're not going to let them perpetuate that lie, that scheme, okay? So when you hear Republicans talking about health savings accounts, think about someone who's, I want to tell you who's going to benefit from a health savings account. Someone who's really rich, all right? Not someone who's getting Medicaid, not Rebecca's family, not families that have benefited from the Affordable Care Act. So this is a scheme by Republicans in Washington, and we've got to stop them. Now, the most important voices you will hear today will not be mine or even the Congressman, with all due respect to Matt Cartwright, a great fighter on these issues, or even Secretary Osborne. It's the voices behind me of families who are going to talk about their circumstances. So I'm not going to get into a long debate about what's right about the Affordable Care Act. We know what it did. We know 20 million people have health care. We know that 156 million people have better protections because they've got employer-sponsored coverage. They have protections they never had before until we pass the ACA, okay? I'm going to just end with one note, with one focus. And Rebecca, I'm glad she brought it up. Medicaid. We can talk about Medicare, and we've got to protect it with all our might. But Medicaid is where they're coming, okay? There are two speeding trains headed for people that have the benefit of Medicaid. And we're talking about Medicare, we're talking about babies, people with disabilities, and people who are over the age of 65. Those three groups of Americans benefit from Medicaid. So if you say you care about older citizens, and you care about babies being born, and you care about individuals with disabilities, you better protect Medicaid. And if you're saying you're going to block grant Medicaid, you can't say that you care about those Americans. You can't pull it off. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that our families who might not have thought about it lately but are going to think about it now, listen to a report like this. Here's a report from November, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, November 30th, 2016. Here's the headline. Medicaid block grant would slash federal funding, shift costs to states, and leave millions more uninsured. So when someone in Washington says they're going to block grant Medicaid, we've got to oppose them with all of our might. We have to make sure that we stop them from block granting Medicaid. We're going to do that here today. We're going to do that for the next several months. I don't care how long it takes. We're going to fight like hell against the block granting of Medicaid. So if they want to fight on Medicaid, I'll fight any one of them. We'll fight any Republican who's going to block grant Medicaid. Because when you block grant Medicaid, you take health care away from babies and young children, you take health care away from people over the age of 65, and you take health care away from families like Rebecca, who have a loved one with a disability. So if you want to fight a Republican, fight them on Medicaid. Thank you very much.
Let's hear it again for Senator Casey. We will need your help in 2018. The Democratic Party will need your help taking back the House and taking back the Senate. Don't forget that. The fight for 2018 starts now. All right, our next speaker is Congressman Matt Cartwright, who represents PA's 17th Congressional District.
Thank you so much. Hey, how about another round of applause for Senator Bob Casey? I hope you were listening to Senator Casey when he talked about Medicaid, because that is the linchpin of what's going on in Washington now. We have these Republicans who have voted somewhere between 56 and 61 times to repeal Obamacare. They've painted themselves into a corner. They have to do it or they look silly. That's why they want to do it. They're also deathly afraid of Trump. And Trump has promised to do that as his first act. But pay attention to Medicaid. Senator Casey is exactly right. Why are we talking about Medicaid? From my own perspective, we're talking about community and rural hospitals. Yesterday, I was down in Fountain Springs, Pennsylvania, in Schuylkill County, just outside of Ashland. St. Catherine's Hospital was there. Tom McHugh, where are you? Tom and I were down there, and we were talking about how in April of 2012, on Good Friday, St. Catherine's Hospital closed. 150 jobs out the window because of what they had to do. They had to treat uninsured people who showed up at their doors at the emergency room. In fact, we talked to an employee, the head of the union down there. He said in January of 2012, they had 140 people show up at the emergency room. How many of those do you think had health insurance? 34 of them. The rest of the care had to be given by the hospital, and they had to absorb that care. They had to absorb it and absorb it and absorb it, and that's what the small hospitals had to do before the Medicaid expansion. And so St. Catherine's went out of business on Good Friday in 2012. And 2 months before that, can you think of a hospital in Carbondale that suffered the same fate? The Marion Community Hospital, out of business, 200 jobs out the door because Medicaid expansion had not come in. In 2015, the Medicaid expansion did happen and is shoring up the fiscal stability of our hospitals. So even if you are one of the lucky individuals who has been the beneficiary of health insurance, your employer gives you health insurance, you've been insured the whole time, even you have suffered a real, tangible impact, negative impact on your health care that your local hospital had to close without the benefit of the Medicaid expansion. Not every state has done this. Senator Casey is exactly right. Block granting this doesn't answer the question because who knows what Republican governors in different states will do with that block grant money. The ACA and its Medicaid expansion has insured so many more Pennsylvanians. You know how many more Pennsylvanians are insured because of that? 300,000 people in Pennsylvania. That's right. So as a result, if they go through with their repeal and their lame replacement, then all of those people will remain uninsured. Your local hospitals will be on shaky financial footing, and you may lose them. That's number one. Number two, 129 million Americans have pre-existing conditions. Diabetes, prior cancer, any kind of pre-existing condition. The ACA set a new standard. You're not allowed to discriminate against people with pre-existing conditions. And we get, I get letters every day from families with family members with pre-existing conditions. I got a letter from a lady in Oliphant 3 weeks ago. Her parents are in their late 50s. They both have terrible pre-existing conditions that require lots of treatment. And she said, if pre-existing conditions are no longer treated as equal, that's going to be like a death sentence for her mom and dad. Yeah. This is not fun and games here. This is not just political footballs. This is life and death for American citizens. And so when I tell you 129 million Americans with pre-existing conditions are paying attention to this, you know they are. You know that when they hear about repealing ACA and replacing it with God knows what, they're being asked to step into an elevator shaft without knowing if there's an elevator there to catch them and save their lives. So I say to you, keep fighting. Keep fighting.
I agree.
Keep fighting. Keep fighting. Keep fighting. Join Senator Casey. Join me. Join Secretary Osborne. Keep fighting. Keep fighting.
Keep fighting. Keep fighting. Keep fighting. Keep fighting.
All right, I have to give a shout out to some of the people that put this rally together and coordinated with Senator Casey's office, Congressman Cartwright's office, the local press, and everybody. All the folks with Action Together and EPA put a lot of hard work into this, including our political outreach coordinator, Marley, if she could say hello to everybody and wave to the crowd. And also Morgan Keller, our PR person. So thank you so much to them for making this happen and working with the Senator and Congressman's office. They did a lot of work to get all of you out here today. Our next speaker is the Director of the Pennsylvania Department of Aging, Secretary Teresa Osborne. She is also a Scranton native, so we are very happy to have her here today.
It is such an honor for me to be here with you today. On behalf of Governor Wolf and as Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Aging, I echo the words of Senator Casey and Congressman Cartwright for thanking you for coming out today on this glorious Sunday to be here. And for those who will courageously step up and share their stories, I can't thank you enough. On behalf of the 13 million Pennsylvanians, there are 2.9 million of those folks who are age 60 and over. Those are the individuals that I have the blessed opportunity to advocate on behalf of every day. Pennsylvania seniors who every day are benefiting by the life-saving opportunities that Medicare, Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act provide for them. I want to give you just two examples of why this is so important to all of us as Pennsylvanians who advocate and serve as voices for our seniors. Individuals every day, our seniors, go to a pharmacy to have a prescription medication filled. Many of them rely upon Medicare Part D. What the Affordable Care Act did for Medicare Part D was to make these donut holes smaller so that folks didn't fall in between catastrophic coverage that wasn't available before the Affordable Care Act came into play today. As an individual who hails from a family of pharmacists, I hear every single day of individuals who struggle to pay for their prescription medications versus paying for their rent, versus paying for their groceries. The Affordable Care Act helps to lessen that burden for our Pennsylvania seniors each and every day by shrinking that donut hole. And a repeal without a replacement to the Affordable Care Act will have catastrophic impacts for our Pennsylvania seniors who rely upon the linchpin of those services each and every day. The second area that the Affordable Care Act helps our Medicare beneficiaries in is in particular with regard to health and wellness screenings. Beautiful day like today, many folks that I saw this morning as I journeyed around Lake Scranton, but also individuals that go to their doctors every day, that because of the Affordable Care Act and Medicare, they annually can have access to wellness visits without added out-of-pocket costs for them, further helping our older Pennsylvanians. They also have access to health and wellness screenings for such things as breast cancer screenings, colorectal screenings, diabetes screenings, as well as cardiovascular disease. Without the Affordable Care Act and an appropriate repeal to that, those life-saving remedies every day for our seniors won't be in place for them. Our seniors who raised their families in our communities, who built our communities, who defended our country in times of crisis, they deserve nothing less. Together, may we continue to take the action steps necessary, just as all of you have today, to continue to advocate for affordable care, for health care, for our seniors, and for all Pennsylvanians who call Pennsylvania home. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Secretary Osborne. I also want to mention Action Together. We have a table over there behind the crowd. If you are not registered to vote, please register to vote. If you just moved here, you need to change your registration. Please get registered. We also have letters and petitions about saving the Affordable Care Act and Medicare and Medicaid. So that's an action that you could do right here today. It'll only take a few minutes. All right, we're going to hear a personal story next from one of our Action Together members, Barbara Rochelle, and she wants to talk about how the ACA and now Medicare have saved her life, along with her fears associated with the ACA's potential repeal. Please welcome Barbara.
Good afternoon. My journey began 25 years ago when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I'm in between the things. I don't know why it's doing that. Fortunately, I had great insurance, so I am a survivor.
Awesome.
Fast forward 16 years from that date. Due to the high dosage of chemo, I was diagnosed with a rare vascular autoimmune disease called Behçet's. Behçet's is a nasty disease. It attacks all of my blood vessels, every last one of them. I am prone to aneurysms, blood clots, and glaucoma. I am right now borderline glaucomic. When a flare-up occurs, I'm sorry. When a flare-up occurs, am I not in the right spot here? Okay. All right. Where was I? Okay. When a flare-up occurs, I am subject to ulcers in my mouth, eyes, intestinal tract, and other places. I bruise so badly that I know people at work don't always believe me when I tell them, honestly, my husband does not beat me. It also causes me to shake a lot. If it affects my surface vessels due to a flare-up, I can swell till they burst and I'll bleed. Fortunately, at the time I was told I had this disease, I still had wonderful health insurance. About a year before the ACA went into effect, I lost my job and therefore my insurance. The bigger insurance companies refused me coverage due to pre-existing conditions. My husband was disabled and on Medicare. We didn't qualify for financial help. I took a policy from a fly-by-night insurance company, paying a higher premium that gave little coverage. I soon exceeded that coverage as my medicine was very expensive and they didn't cover some of it at all. By the time I finally received coverage by the ACA, our savings were depleted and I was on death's door, literally. ACA saved me. Unfortunately, I needed higher dosages and other medications to get back on track. I can remember how scared I was. I would never want anyone to have to go through this. I didn't want to die. Unfortunately, if ACA is repealed, children, the elderly, and many others will suffer needlessly and could, in fact, die. Fix what needs fixing and leave the rest alone. Yes. I am now on Medicare. What frightens me now is that Medicare and the ACA are tied together, as was explained by our previous speaker. If a pre-existing condition clause is left out of whatever plan the Republicans think they will put in place, I can once again lose the supplement part that covers my medication, plus medication costs will rise again. I was recently in the hospital for acute bronchitis, pleurisy, and COPD. They also thought I had pulmonary vasculitis due to the Behçet's. Fortunately, I didn't, but it still may be in my future. There is a 75% mortality rate within 5 years with medication that runs around $800 a month. Obviously, I'd have less time without it. Again, I don't want to die. No one wants to die because they can't get medical care. We must stand as one loud voice to stop the repeal of the ACA, Medicare, and Medicaid. Please, please, please be part of that voice. Let's stop them.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for that really heartfelt and moving story. Our next speaker is Antoinette Krause, who is the founding executive director of the Pennsylvania Health Access Network. Please welcome her.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone that's here. What's up? How's everyone doing? How's Scranton? Just a little secret, everyone's home for recess. Senator Toomey's in Allentown. Make sure he can hear you. So when I say, what's up, Scranton? What's up? My name is Antoinette Krause, and I'm the executive director of the Pennsylvania Health Access Network. We represent over 1.1 million consumers. And recently we launched EnsurePA, which is a statewide advocacy campaign made up of coalition partners and grassroots supporters across the state to send one clear message. We cannot afford to repeal the Affordable Care Act. We cannot afford to block grant or per capita cap Medicaid, and we can't afford to privatize Medicare. We also help enroll individuals in health insurance coverage, and over the past 2 years, we've enrolled about 7,500 individuals in almost every Pennsylvania county. They're Democrats, Republicans, independents, small business owners. They're from Scranton, they're from Philadelphia, they're from rural Pennsylvania. And the one thing we know is that they now have the relief and peace of mind that comes with having access to health insurance coverage. And we can't afford to go back to a time where folks are scared because they're gonna lose their home because of medical bankruptcy. What's at stake here in Pennsylvania? There are 1.1 million Pennsylvanians who have enrolled in the Marketplace and Medicaid expansion. That's 1.1 million Pennsylvanians who are getting coverage. There's another 5.5 million Pennsylvanians who are protected because they have a pre-existing condition. 5.5 million Pennsylvanians, that's almost half the population of our state. So I want to thank Senator Casey, Congressman Cartwright, and Governor Wolf for standing up for Pennsylvania. This fight is also personal for me. I grew up with a mother who had epilepsy, so I see the seizure-free since the ACA, and I understand the importance of that. I saw my parents struggle every day fighting with insurance companies to make sure my mom got the coverage she needed. My dad worked hard his whole entire life, the same company for over 35 years. When it came time to retire, he couldn't. He wanted to spend more time with me and my sister. You know, he put a daughter through college, my sister joined the Marines, and he couldn't retire because my mom would get denied insurance coverage or be priced out of the market at a price to get health insurance that would take away their whole retirement savings. So when the Affordable Care Act was passed, my mom was finally able to get coverage and my dad was able to retire. So I want to ask Senator Toomey, and I want to ask the leadership in Congress, what happens to my family? What happens to the folks standing up with me today? What happens to Mia and Barbara if we're successful and they repeal the ACA or make drastic cuts to Medicaid? That is not acceptable. We can't go backwards. So everyone needs to stand up. It's recess week. Call Senator Toomey. Go visit your members of Congress and say, no cuts to Medicaid. Do not privatize Medicare, and do not repeal the ACA. And I hope you will stand with me and join our campaign. You can go to EnsurePA.org, and we will keep you updated on the latest in Congress. So thank you, and thanks everyone who's here
Okay, keep keeping it moving. Our next speaker is Pamela Zutina. She is the Executive Director of the ARC of Luzerne County, an advocacy organization for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. She's also the parent of Robert, who is joining her today to share their story.
Hi, my name is Pamela Zotnia. I am the Executive Director of the ARC of Luzerne County. The ARC advocates for and serves people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including Down syndrome, autism, fetal alcohol syndrome disorders, cerebral palsy, as well as other diagnoses. The ARC has a network of over 650 chapters across the country, promoting and protecting the human rights of people with IDD and actively supporting their full inclusion and participation in the community. My son, Robert, is here with me today, and we would like to share with you our story of how Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act impacts our family, as well as many others served by the ARC across the country. Robert was born 30 years ago premature and what we thought were some minor developmental delays. Over the course of the next few years and many visits to doctors and therapists, we discovered that his disability was more significant and he would require lifelong support. His formal diagnoses include cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, seizure disorder, visual impairment, anxiety, as well as others. For most of his childhood, while the other children were out playing in the neighborhood, we spent our time at rehab hospitals where he had multiple orthopedic surgeries to correct contractures, hip dysplasias, spinal fusion, as well as thousands of hours of therapies to prevent additional contractures and help him learn to use his body to the best of his ability. As he got older, his needs increased. His father, sister, and I assisted him as best as we could. We took turns feeding him, drove him to medical appointments, assisted him to complete his daily range of motion exercises, and physically assisting him with daily needs, showers, dressing, transferring him in and out of bed, and his wheelchair, and many, many other things. While other families spent their summers at picnics and vacationing, we spent our time at meetings with teams of professionals developing plans for his education and healthcare needs. By the time Robert was a teenager, his body had become stronger, but mine began to weaken. After so many years of bending and lifting him, my back finally gave out. I herniated several discs and developed neuropathy. My doctors advised me to stop lifting anything over 10 pounds. This was devastating news for our family. I left the doctor's office wondering how my son would remain safe and healthy if I wasn't able to lift him. Searching for help, I placed a call to my son's caseworker at our county's Mental Health and Developmental Services office. They explained to me that because Robert was eligible for Medicaid, he could receive supports and services through a Medicaid-funded waiver. We applied and he was approved for a consolidated waiver administered through the Office of Developmental Programs. The waiver allows him to purchase services to meet his needs to keep him safe and healthy in the community. We were able to hire staff for a few hours each week to help him with his care after school and on weekends. When Robert exited school, we were faced with a new set of issues. What would he do all day long? Who would take care of him while his father and I were at work? The waiver allowed us to explore options in the community. For a while, he attended what we commonly refer to as a day program. When Robert was 25, he began to develop some new medical issues. Because of his communication challenges, it was difficult to identify and diagnose what was happening. I took him to a variety of doctors searching for an answer. Every day he got worse, his pain increased, he stopped sleeping and eating, and spent most of his days screaming and begging for help. He was unable to continue to attend the day program. The Medicaid waiver provided us with the Medicaid waiver provided us with access to assistance to identify specialists and professionals to help my son and my family. And then on February 3rd, 2013, my son woke up pale and weak. When I removed him from his bed, he began to projectile vomit blood. I rushed him to the hospital, where we were told he was bleeding internally and could possibly die. We spent weeks in the hospital. He received multiple blood transfusions as they searched for the cause of the bleeds. They identified several bleeds in the lining of his stomach and also diagnosed him with gastroparesis, a condition in which the spontaneous movement of the muscles in your stomach does not function normally, affecting the body's ability to digest food. When the doctors thought he was stable, they sent us home with visiting nurses to monitor him daily. A few weeks later, he stopped eating and again started screaming. He was readmitted, and after several days, it was found that he had blockages in his bowels. It's taken several years for Robert to recover from this medical trauma. The supports he receives through the Medicaid-funded waiver have allowed us to develop a program in our home to support him in his recovery and to develop a meaningful life in the community. He is, excuse me, I'm recovering from bronchitis. He is an active volunteer for several organizations, including the ARC. He visits a wellness clinic twice a week where he receives non-invasive pain management treatment. We pay cash for this because he is unable to use traditional medications used for pain management due to the side effects that will adversely affect his gastrointestinal issues. So I'm having difficulty turning pages today. Nutrition specialists have assisted us to develop a dietary plan that meets his needs and allows his digestive system to operate correctly. His support team assists him with his daily needs, and he is currently searching for an opportunity to become employed so he can become financially secure when I am no longer available to assist him. We developed tracking systems for his support staff to document his medical conditions, sleep patterns, behavioral health patterns, and bowel movements, so we can quickly identify issues and intervene before they become critical. We came here today to share our story because we want people to understand what it is like for the thousands of families in our country who are supporting their loved ones who have disability. We want you to understand that without the long-term supports and services provided through Medicaid, our families will collapse. For me, I would be unable to work, pay taxes, purchase health insurance for myself and my son to supplement our medical needs. Without a paycheck, I could not afford my home, I would be unable to pay my bills or purchase food, and my family would join the many others in our country who live in poverty and are dependent on the social safety net that is currently at risk of being dismantled in our country. The Affordable Care Act has allowed me to purchase private health insurance regardless of our pre-existing conditions. If we allow the ACA to be repealed, my son and I may become ineligible for health care due to our pre-existing conditions. I also have a 32-year-old daughter. Until the Affordable Care Act became law, she was unable to afford health insurance. A few months ago, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. She is now insulin dependent and will be for the rest of her life. Her doctors told her if she had gone untreated for another few weeks, she could have died. If the ACA is repealed, she also may become ineligible for coverage due to her pre-existing condition. I want to thank Senator Casey and Congressman Cartwright for standing with us today. My family is grateful to both of you for your constant efforts on our behalf, as well as the more than 50,000 people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Pennsylvania who receive Medicaid-funded supports and services, the more than 14,000 people who are waiting for services, and the nearly 3 million people in Pennsylvania and the 70 million people in our country who receive coverage through Medicaid. To the legislators who are unable to join us today, I ask that you stand with these men on the floors of the House and the Senate and fight on our behalf to protect the needs of your constituents. Do not allow the ACA to be repealed and replaced without the assurance that people with pre-existing conditions will continue to receive coverage. Do not approve the Republican proposal that suggests paying for the ACA. I'm sorry. Do not Do not vote to approve the Republican proposal that suggests paying for the ACA repeal by changing the way Medicaid is funded. Giving states the choice between per capita caps and block grants would be devastating for people with disabilities and would also negatively impact already cash-strapped states. And to all of you who join us here today, make sure your voices are heard. My son's voice, like so many others with disabilities, is not loud and often goes unheard by our elected officials. We must be loud for him. Write letters, make phone calls, share your stories. Do not allow the progress we have made to be set back. Join a movement, organize, and keep fighting. Make sure your legislators know that the decisions they make today will impact our decisions in the 2018 midterm election when we use our most powerful tool, our right to cast our vote, for the legislators to support our needs and to replace those who do not. Please don't cut our lights on. Thank you.
Okay, before I bring up the last speaker, let me ask you, are you going to let them repeal the Affordable Care Act? No! Are you going to let them block grant Medicaid? No! And are you going to let them mess with Medicare? No! Our last speaker is Tara Behringer, and she owns her business in Jim Thorpe. She relies on the marketplace to purchase her insurance. As a person with type 1 diabetes, she has benefited significantly from the ACA, and she is concerned about what repeal will mean for her and her treatment of type 1 diabetes. Please welcome Tara.
First, I want to thank Casey and Cartwright for being here today, and I want to thank all of you, and I'm going to try to get through this without crying, because you being here gives me hope.
Yeah.
It makes me feel better and not a little bit less afraid, because I know there are people out there that are fighting for me and for all these people up here, and that I'm not alone and we're not alone. So thank you. My name is Tara. I'm a mom. I'm self-employed, and I'm an insulin-dependent juvenile diabetic. I was diagnosed at 16. I'm now 42. If I asked any one of you what you thought the worst part of being a diabetic was, I'm sure I'd hear the needles, the constant finger sticks, not being able to just mindlessly eat sugar and sweets and having to count from every piece of food that passes my lips, or having to go to the doctor 3 or 4 times a year to have my urine analyzed for kidney functions and blood tests to check for any possible complications. And then there's the complications themselves, like kidney disease, diabetic neuropathy, blindness, or losing a limb or an appendage should I get a cut that gets infected. At 16, these were the things that I thought would be the worst part of being a diabetic. I'll never forget though, the doctor who diagnosed and treated me also told me that diabetes shouldn't and wouldn't hold me back in my life, because there were 2 things that my condition precluded me from doing, and that was getting my pilot's license and being a lumberjack. That always gets a laugh. Why? Okay, honestly, I was okay with never getting a pilot's license and definitely okay with never being a lumberjack. You see, diabetes is a manageable disease. Sure, some of these things are, I'm not going to lie, it's a real pain in the ass, right? But all those things kind of become habit. And I can say that those things are not the worst part of being a diabetic. The hardest part, the scariest part, the part that keeps me up at night is wondering, worrying, and praying that I'll be able to afford the health care I need that keeps me healthy, that staves off these complications, and keeps me otherwise healthy. I've been a diabetic for 26 years, and I consider myself fortunate to not be experiencing any of the complications that come along with the disease so far. And this is because of intense insulin therapy. From the moment I left high school, I've worked a full-time job with benefits. Honestly, I really had no other choice. If I was in between jobs, I was sure to maintain coverage in what's called a COBRA plan until the next job's insurance plan kicked in, so that I didn't fall into pre-existing condition clause hell. And you know what, as I grow older and I reflect back on some of the choices I made in my life, I realize that as well-intended as that doctor was, he was wrong. Diabetes did hold me back, but not in the way you may think. And not because of the disease itself, but because of the U.S. healthcare system. You see, I couldn't take the risk that other young people take. I couldn't just pick up and backpack for Europe. I couldn't take a year or two off from college to find myself. And I couldn't just pick up and move to California and wait tables as I pursued my dream of a music and acting career that I dreamed of as a child. My life depended on insurance, and I had to stay tied to a 9-to-5. Just to point out now, the ACA does allow parents to cover their children until the age of 26. And perhaps that gives other young people the ability to find out who they are, what they want to be, and to follow their dreams without the fear of being uninsured, especially if they have a manageable condition like I did. In 2001, I finally managed to move to self-employment. This meant purchasing my own very expensive insurance plan. I lived in New York, where I was born and raised, a guaranteed issued state. But in 2008, when I moved to PA, as a result of bad advice and guidance from an insurance professional, I ended up in what was always my worst nightmare. There was only one insurance company that was a guaranteed issue plan in PA. And I don't know if you know what guaranteed issue was, but there was one plan where they wouldn't look at your medical conditions, but usually the premiums were twice the amount of the market, the other plans that were medical. And basically they wanted healthy people on their plans. They wouldn't give it to, they wanted to take your money and they didn't want to pay for health care. They wanted almost $800 a month for me alone. This did not include coverage for my then husband. As part of the pre-existing condition clause, I would have to pay for all the medical costs related to my diabetes out of pocket for 1 full year, in addition to the insurance premium, before the insurance would kick in and cover it. Well, I couldn't afford both the insulin, pump supplies, doctor visits. Okay, I think it's done. And blood glucose monitoring supplies and the insurance. It really became a choice between my medicine and insurance, not much of a choice. And so for the first time in my life since being diagnosed, I became uninsured. At that time, insulin would cost me around $300 a month. And then when you added in my pump supplies and other supplies, I was looking at about $800 a month. Fortunately, my then husband and I were able to manage. But in 2010, we started our divorce. Having been a stay-at-home mom since my son was born in 2006, I suddenly found myself a single mom, no job, no insurance, with an expensive disease to manage. I did manage to find some jobs here and there, but I still didn't make enough to pay for rent, food, and my medical supplies, which cost more than my rent. But I made too much for Medicaid. It was an extremely stressful time. Fortunately, I had an acquaintance of an acquaintance whose son had extra insulin pump supplies because he switched the kind he used, but his matched mine, so they gave them to me. I made them stretch by wearing the cartridge for longer than the FDA recommends. My endocrinologist, when I told him of my situation, handed me samples of insulin that they had at their office. 5 vials, or $500 worth of insulin. I wept when she handed them to me. And I prayed that I could make those vials last for as long as possible, so that on the next visit they'd have more samples to give me. It was scary, because without insulin I would become very sick. And by trying to stretch out my insulin, I put myself at risk for complications and other issues. I was ecstatic when the ACA was passed. As many of you know, the pre-existing condition clause didn't kick in for adults right away, but there was a bridge plan that the states were setting up. It was limited enrollment, first come, first served. And you bet your butt, on the day that website went live, I was there in the morning refreshing my browser over and over and over again, so I could enroll in that bridge plan. And you know, I didn't have this written down, but I do want to say, a lot of the arguments I've always heard about either the Affordable Care Act, or even universal health care was that everybody's just looking for a free ride. I wasn't looking for a free ride. I just want to access medical care at what I can afford to pay for it. And I made some sacrifices to be able to afford that bridge plan. I had to switch things around so that I could make that much. And at that time, it was something like $298, which was cheaper than the $800 a month previous, so I was very grateful. And I was probably the first to sign up. When I got my insurance card in the mail, I cried. How pathetic is that? I was so overjoyed and relieved that I cried. But my relief from the anxiety was short-lived. The ACA, as we well know, has been under constant attack from Republicans from day one. I knew as long as Obama occupied that White House that repeal was not possible. Apparently, the Republicans didn't, as they attempted to overturn it 52 times, sometimes attacking only aspects of the law, but aspects that I knew and that they knew would collapse the entire law. I was anxious when they threatened to shut down the government, and then I was really anxious when we were waiting for the Supreme Court decision. And at each failed attempt, a sigh of relief. As you can imagine, my stress level now is through the roof. But now, it's going to be even harder. Humalog insulin has increased in price 700% since 2008. It costs 335 cents a bottle. I need 3 a month. That's over $1,000 a month. By the way, the same vial costs only $38 in Canada. Yeah. Cost to maintain my diabetes with pump supplies, CGM, and insulin will run me $19,474.27 a year, or $14,791.72, taking advantage of the non-insured discount program that my pump supply company has. That's more than 50% of my income. Guidelines for household budgets always say that rent and mortgage should be your biggest expense at 30%, and that health care is only supposed to take up 10%. Kind of a joke, huh? Lost the page. Sorry. Look, the ACA isn't perfect. I can attest to that. I'm in a wonderful relationship with a man, and I would love to marry him. He would love to marry me. But I can't marry him because of how the ACA subsidies are calculated for couples and families. Because I would lose my subsidies. And it would cost our family $15,000 more a year. So I get why some people are upset with the ACA. But repealing the ACA will have devastating effects on me and my family. For me, it may not mean I die within months, but having to cut back on insulin threatens my lifespan and puts me at great risk for the things that will kill me. But for some, death will be immediate. I met a woman at another rally whose husband has a brain tumor. And while their insurance is very expensive, between the premiums and her deductibles, his treatment without insurance is downright unattainable, and he's only alive today because of the ACA. And without treatment, he will die. For many of us, myself included, this isn't a matter of dollar and cents, it's a matter of life and death. So how can we make improvements? Well, I got some ideas. I read the ACA, by the way. I have it on my Kindle, so I refer to it often. I know a little bit way too much about a lot of this stuff, so bear with me. Allow states with less dense populations that currently have 1 or 2 options purchase insurance from neighboring states that offer more options. Increase subsidies to couples and families and eliminate the marriage penalty. The FPL is not really calculated very well and stands at $11,000 for an individual, but only jumps up to $15,000 for 2, which drastically reduces subsidies for married people and their families, eliminating it in many cases. The subsidies are vital, and any plan that does not include them is worthless. I currently get both premium subsidies for being within 100 to 400% of FPL, and I get cost-sharing subsidies, which reduces my deductibles for being within 100 to 250% of the FPL. Without those subsidies, I couldn't afford the insurance. So I get why families are feeling that it's not affordable, and we need to fix that. But, I'm going to add this in there too, because I wrote this before the outline came out, I think yesterday. And they want to tie subsidies to age and not income.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, okay, that doesn't do anything, because I'll tell you what, without the subsidies I have, I couldn't afford the insurance anyway. I mean, it doesn't make much sense, right? Untie health care from I think we should untie health care from employment. Yes. Listen, the average employer contribution nationwide is $18,000. I mean, I'm rounding up or down. I didn't put the exact number down. And in the state of Pennsylvania, it's something like $16,900 that the employer contributes for the employees a year. Take that money, put it in the employee's checkbook, check, let them go on the exchange, apply for the subsidies that they may have otherwise gotten because of their income level, and allow that will reduce their premiums and their deductibles, and allow them to buy the plan that works for them. Because, like, I'll give you an example. When I shop for my insurance, I take the plan that has the higher premium with the lower deductible. Because if you do the math, the lower premium amount with the higher deductible would actually cost me more. And when it depends on how much you use it and what you need. There's options out there, but when you go for an employment plan, you only get what they offer you. So a family's being stuck with a plan with a $15,000 deductible, so nothing gets covered when they go to the doctor or they have an illness. Better yet, and you're all going to love this one, open Medicare for all as a public option.
Yes.
And here's a better one. Allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices with big pharma, similar to what other countries do, that allows Canada to have $38 insulin while we pay $335 a bottle. And we need more price controls and accountability for such ridiculous increases. Why did insulin cost increase 700% in such a short period of time? And we all know that insulin is not the only drug that's had that happen. I say to all politicians out there, stop worrying about party. Stop the nonsense and stop the politics. Get down to the business of fixing the ACA in a way where we get more people covered, not less. Anything less than improving upon what we already have is a waste of time.
Yes.
You want our votes next election, then start paying attention and doing what is best for the people of this country, and not worry about what is best for the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies that are paying for your re-election.
Yes.
Too much time was already wasted on nonsense these last years. Rather, time that could have been spent fixing what we know is wrong with it and making it better. Because the ACA is a great foundation for healthcare reform. And let's be honest, because most of us here, I'll be honest, I don't think the ACA went far enough. I want a one-payer healthcare system, and the ACA is our path to that, somehow, some way. But we need to fix it, not repeal it.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to my story.